Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Himate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Chachari Satari Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavindam Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
So welcome everyone, Hare Krishna. So today our speaker, after some time, maybe 2-3 months, we got Yogesvara back with us again, and always happy to have him with us because he's a very wise person. So we could all, well, it's not easy just to find someone who will read Srila Prabhupada's books and speak from them, but that's a lot easier to find someone who will do that than to find someone who really understands how to apply them to the circumstances in life that we encounter day to day, particularly more challenging ones, or even issues that some people, and also to be able to think independently and deal with issues that for some people are hard to talk about or maybe controversial. It's great to find someone who can, with confidence, maturely speak about that in a way that you can feel comfortable is true to Srila Prabhupada's teachings. And it can be fascinating, eye-opening, and help you do some, soul searching. And so that's what I think of Yogesvara Prabhu. Yogesvara joined ISKCON in the late 60s and is a disciple of ISKCON founder Acharya. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. And he did a lot of service for Prabhupada in the temple in France, a lot of translating work, I believe. And then later on, as the years passed, and after Srila Prabhupada was no longer with us in the later 70s, after that, Yogeshvara entered into, maybe you could say, a different chapter in his life as an author. He writes prolifically, such as, I don't have the names of some of the books, but on a writer of the Holocaust, on George Harrison, and various topics, as well as in Krishna consciousness, Krishna conscious direct topics. And he's quite skilled in a natural, organic way and bridging the gap among those who are, of different faiths or don't have a faith, so to speak, bridging the gap between their view and the view of those who are Prabhupada's devout followers. And Yogeshvara is local to the New York area, living in Long Island and giving talks at temples and centers, as well as yoga centers and all sorts of places wherever he can reach out to people. He does these things. He also has a regular classes on the internet on Gita, and he can, and maybe Anuradha can send a link for that if there is one via Zoom to the chat. And I'll stop there. I've made Yogeshwar give me a signal. I think it meant stop there, so I will. GitaWisdom.org. So I'll turn it over to you, Yogeshwar, and just to repeat for those who came later. So we're the class is on the Bhagavad-gita, and Yogeshvara, at his discretion, he may prompt us for questions and comments either while he's speaking or waiting until the end, as he likes. So thanks a lot, and I turn it over to you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you always, as always, for inviting me to speak to your group. We've been doing this for quite a while now, and it's always a pleasure to meet with you and your community there. You asked me to speak about the fourth chapter, fourth verse of chapter 3. So let me start there. This is Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita. And the Sanskrit is as follows: Na karmanam anarambhan naiskamyan purushosnute nacha sanyasanad eva siddhim samadhigacchati. Na means not. I'll read the synonyms for you here. Karmanan means of prescribed duties, karma, actions, prescribed actions, meaning prescribed, meaning what is appropriate according to an individual's skills and psychology. So the word karma in this sense is being used not as some bad thing, but it's meant to indicate our natural propensities for engagement with the world. Ana rambat, by non-performance, by not doing that. Naishkarmyam, freedom from reaction. Purusha, a man or a person. Ashnute, achieves not. Cha, also sanyasanat, by renunciation. Eva, simply. Siddhim, success. Siddhi, you might have heard of the yogic siddhi, is the successes in yoga, or the powers that one can achieve through mystic yoga practice. So siddhim here is defined as success. And samadhigacchati, attains. The translation is as follows: not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction. nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. So this Krishna is making 2 points to Arjuna here. Not by abstaining from work can you achieve freedom for reaction. In other words, if you think, I'm not going to get involved, I'll do nothing. In my field of Holocaust studies, we talk about bystanders, people who saw harm being done, who were witnesses to the travesties being perpetrated against Jews and other minorities, and who did nothing, thinking, I'll avoid a reaction, I'll avoid getting in trouble. So this verse puts the lie to that idea, that if you don't do something, therefore you're not implicated. The fact is that if you don't do something when you see something wrong being done, that inaction implicates you in the consequences of what's being done. Nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. Well, that's described by Srila Prabhupada in his purport or commentary. I'll read that. It's not very long. The renounced order of life. Renounced order of life means the sannyasa order or the monkhood, the priest class. In the Vedic sense and the ancient Indian sense, it's a very, very elevated order. A sannyasi is someone who is dead to society materially. He has no engagement with business, with family, with politics. It's someone who is completely dedicated to a holy life and to the upliftment of society. A very, very elevated position. The renounced order of life can be accepted, according to Prabhupada in this purport, when one has been purified by the discharge of the prescribed forms of duty, which are laid down just to purify the hearts of materialistic men. No, what does he mean by that? Well, that an enlightened life, a progressive life, is something that unfolds in stages. We come to higher and higher levels of realization about ourselves, the nature of creation, our relationship with one another, with God, step by step, gradually. It can't be artificially attained just by taking on the trappings of sainthood. Without purification, one cannot attain success by abruptly adopting the fourth order of life, sannyas. According to the empirical philosophers, here he's referring to the Sankhya philosophers, the Gyanis, those who study spiritual life in a more cerebral, rationalist manner. According to the empirical philosophers, simply by adopting sannyas or retiring from fruitive activities, one at once becomes as good as Narayan. What does that mean? That at the time, it's still today to some degree, but certainly 5,000 years ago or so, when the Bhagavad-gita was spoken in India, there were different classes of spiritual study. And one of the more popular classes was the Vedantic school of logic and reason. You can say that it's an early precursor to empiric science in many ways. They analytical approach to what is matter, what is the difference between consciousness and the physical body, what is the nature of the elements that make up the world, and so on. That's under the rubric, under the heading of Vedantic study, sometimes known as Jnana Yoga, or the yoga of knowledge. So according to those schools, if you simply withdraw from the world, there's no more karmic engagement. You're home free, so to speak, and therefore you become as good as God. God has no material encumbrances. Those who give up activity in the world become that way as well. But Lord Krishna does not approve this principle. Srila Prabhupada continues. Without purification of heart, very interesting use of phrasing there, without purification of heart. He doesn't talk about higher intellectual knowledge or without going through great austerities and yogic exercises. He says purification of heart. Sannyas, without that, sannyas is simply a disturbance to the social order. On the other hand, if someone takes to the transcendental service of the Lord, even without discharging his prescribed duties, whatever he may be able to advance in the cause is accepted by the Lord, called Buddhi Yoga. Svalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bayat. That's a quote from verse 40 of the second chapter, where Krishna tells Arjuna, this is a dialogue that's going on in the Gita. Krishna told Arjuna earlier that you may be confused about how to make spiritual progress. Whatever progress you can make, that's a permanent gain for you. You'll never lose it. Even a slight performance of such a principle enables one to overcome great difficulties. Okay, so that's the fourth verse and commentary of the third chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. Let's put this in some context. I'm not sure if everyone here has been following the sequence of events. So very briefly, Arjuna was confronted with something he never wanted to do, and that was to engage in battle with family and friends, people who for political reasons had taken an adversarial position and who were strident about it. They would not relinquish, would not admit to having unrighteously usurped the kingdom of Arjuna and his brothers. And after negotiations failed, there was no choice but to engage in battle. So that happens sometimes. Even people with the best of intentions may become entrenched and not find it within themselves to be able to compromise and come to some mutually acceptable outcome. And when that happens, your options are you either change or you face the consequences, you face the fire. And that's what happened to the Kauravas, the enemy on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And so Arjuna's initial reaction was, let me just withdraw. Let me become a yogi. Let me become peaceful. And under many circumstances, that's not a bad idea, but it's a terrible idea for a warrior. And so Krishna is telling him, this is the worst possible choice you could be making. You think that by withdrawing from this battlefield, somehow you're going to avoid an unpleasant dharma, an unpleasant duty. You have to think again here. If you don't do this, you're allowing we'd call them terrorists today. You're allowing an illegal and hurtful band of usurpers to take over the kingdom. People will be hurt. That'll be on your shoulders. And you'll live with the consequences of this for the rest of your days. So from every possible angle, Krishna refuted Arjuna's arguments for why he shouldn't do this. And this third chapter is still very early on in the discussion. If you consider the discussion somewhere around 2.5 or 3 hours long, we're probably still in the first 15 minutes, 20 minutes of their discussion. And Arjuna has not relinquished his plan to leave the battlefield. He's very set on this course of inaction. And but Krishna in this last chapter really kind of laid it out for him. He said, this is a terrible idea. You think you're incapable of doing this. You are capable of doing this. And you must. This is unavoidable. At the same time, Krishna is explaining in this earlier chapter that you should not get involved in actions that are detrimental to society. So this is confusing Arjuna because he's thinking that what he has to do is action that's detrimental. So he's mixing things up. And there's, if you will, a certain kind of intentionality there. When you don't want to do something, the first thing you do is rationalize it away. Well, I can't do that. Be causing harm to people. And the scriptures say one should be peaceful. I want to be peaceful. I don't want to hurt anyone. And so Krishna kind of spells it out that you're deluding yourself. You're inventing reasons that don't hold up to scrutiny. And in the beginning of this third chapter, very interesting, Arjuna says, why do you want me to engage in this ghastly warfare if you think that intelligence is better than fruitive work? Why would you, if you're saying that working in a way that's material is harmful, then why are you encouraging me to fight? I'm confused. I don't know which way you want me to go. You want me to disengage from karmic activity, or do you want me to fight? Which is it? He actually knew the answer, but he's being, if we're going to be polite about it, we could say that he's pretending to not really understand what's required so that Krishna can speak the Bhagavad-gita. I think there's something also going on here because this is an actual battlefield and these are actual people and this is an actual historic event. It's not just a stage play. It's not just a thin dramatic device in order to get good ideas out into society. There's some actual confusion on Arjuna's part here. Throughout the Gita, Arjuna shows himself to be a very sensitive, warm-blooded, caring soul. He's a good soul. He's not only a brilliant warrior and strategist and a close personal friend of Krishna's, which is why Krishna is taking the time to talk with him. He's also the most decent of human beings. His desire to withdraw is real. He really doesn't want to hurt anyone. It's not just a literary device. This is heartfelt on his part. And he says in the second verse, my intelligence is bewildered by your equivocal instructions. So legitimately, he doesn't know. I mean, what do I do? Do I fight and incur the reaction of doing that? Or do I leave the I don't know what you want me to do anymore. I'm confused. So Krishna is now describing that, there are two kinds of approaches to your life. And now we can kind of create the bridge into the world we know, those of us who are here on this phone call, this Zoom call tonight. There's two approaches to your life. One is to run and hide, bury your head in the sand, and not confront the things that are standing in the way of you moving forward, getting to where you want to go. Or you can take the proverbial bull by the horns, confront the thing that is the scariest thing in your life. And by doing that, wrestle it to the ground until you recognize that you never really had to be as afraid of it as you thought. That's a situation each of us here has to define for ourselves. What is it that makes you afraid? I was listening to a podcast with a friend of mine who's a screenwriter. Paul Kusheri, and Paul's got some great films out there. He's written some fabulous work. And he's describing the writing process. And he says, when people go to a movie, they want to get involved in the lives of the people. They're up on the screen. They don't want to just see a lot of, flash and bang and special effects. They want a really good story, even if it's a bad guy. Even if the person is despicable. If the writing, if the drama allows you to go inside that person's life to understand what is their pain, what is the thing that's causing them pain, that's motivating them to act this way. What is it that they didn't get in life? What is it that they're afraid of? And then you can identify with that. And that identification with what's going up on the screen is the satisfaction of a story well told. And that's kind of what's happening here in the Bhagavad-gita. If you allow yourself to envision this almost as a film, a well-produced film, it's history, but if you think of it as a well-produced film, then you'll derive the satisfaction of going inside the drama of what's happening here. And at that point, you can, I think, really begin to understand Arjuna's dilemma and what's in it for us, because what he's doing is what we do. We come to a point, this is classic Joe Campbell monomyth stuff. We come to a point in our life journey where there's something in the way. There's some block. It can be financial, it can be emotional, it can be sexual, it can be psychological, it can be a new job, it can be a new relationship, it can be an old relationship going bad, it can be some tragedy in life, it can be some opportunity that comes your way, but to pursue that opportunity, you have to hurt somebody else. There are all kinds of what Campbell would call the belly of the whale, or that point of no return. My son is a pilot, and he knows about the point of no return. Point of no return is when you've exhausted your fuel to the extent that you cannot now turn around and go back to where you started from. We reach points of no return in our life. That's what Arjuna is confronting now. This is his belly of the whale. It's his point of no return. And when that happens, you either transform, you either find some way of embracing that moment, or you die. In fact, either way you die, because the death doesn't have to be a physical death, it can be metaphysical death. If you don't embrace the life, one of Campbell's popular sayings is, you have to give up the life you've wanted in order to achieve the life you can. I'm paraphrasing here. His point is, we develop expectations, dreams, hopes, wishes for ourselves. And sometimes that's the very thing that stands in the way of us making some serious strides forward. It's at that moment when you're willing to consider that the universe sends a guru. It's some amazing cosmic principle that when you've reached bottom and you're capable of saying, I need help, I really need help here, that prapatti is the word in the Bhagavad-gita, that giving of oneself, sometimes it's called surrender, which has some negative connotations, but the idea is, when you reach a point where you are capable of relinquishing the defenses that you've thrown up and asking for help. That's the moment that help can come. Without you asking for it, help has no place to go. When you ask for it, there are all kinds of resources out there that you are unaware of, and they can come to your aid. And that's essentially what the message is of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna is telling Arjuna, stop procrastinating, stop inventing excuses, stop throwing up all of these defensive walls. Just be with me. Just allow me to be with you. You're not alone. I want to help you. I will help you. But you can't be fighting me. You've got a bigger battle to fight here. So, when we go inside these verses of the Gita, we do find something quite human. It transcends its moment in time. The Gita is not a 5,000-year-old text only. It's an extraordinarily powerful insight into the human condition. And if you are capable of reading it in that way, from a contemporary perspective, and by contemporary, I mean psychological, as well as historic and sociological, there are things going on here in this book that are front page headlines in the news today. If you look at, this horrible antipathy, for example, in Congress, this disgusting, degrading, humiliating vitriol between the two sides of the aisle. What have you got there? Well, you've got an impasse. You've got people who have dug in so firmly that they're no longer capable of listening to reason. That's a pathological condition. I'm not a doctor, so I can't tell you what's going on with some of the people in our government today, but they're denying reality. They're denying science. They're denying their own obligation to be working for the good of the American people. And there's this fear that's grabbed on, that's holding really tight. That's Bhagavad-gita. That's right here in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. So I think the value of these sessions that Atmi Vedana Prabhu has put together is that we have a chance to do that. We can take a different approach to our analysis of the teachings of Sri Krishna in a way that actually has relevance to what we're doing today with our lives and the world around us. So I can go on, but I prefer to play off of the energy in the room. So if you have questions, why don't we just open this up? Just before we do that, though, you always have to take things in context. It's curious and revealing to see what happens next. So I know that other people will be speaking on these other verses, but allow me, if you don't mind, just to give you a little bit of foreshadowing of what's coming up next. Here's Arjuna saying, I don't know which way to go here. Do I fight? Do I not fight? Here's Krishna saying, you're not going to get the spiritual benefit that you're telling me you want by not fighting. You have to fight. You have to do your duty. And he says in the 5th verse, this is fascinating. Everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. That's absolutely fascinating. That it's the nature of life to be active. You can't withdraw. You can. You can go to, Sonoma in Arizona. You can go to Hawaii. You can go to, I don't know where your, ideal oasis awaits, but the Hamptons, wherever you want to go. But how long can you stay there before it gets really boring, So that there's only so much lack of activity, lack of action that you can deal with, without just becoming, totally anesthetized to life altogether. It's the nature of consciousness to be active. Consciousness is an active energy. It's dynamic. It's a kinetic force. And therefore, the question is not whether to engage or not engage, but how to engage. And what's interesting about this is that there's a phenomenon in quantum theory these days that says life itself is without free will. Essentially, what Krishna is saying, in a way, he says everyone is forced to act helplessly. Now, Krishna says, according to the qualities of his material, of a person's karmic nature, in physics, it would be called your particulate history, that you are a combination of particles and wave functions and dynamic forces that can be traced back historically. And if you flash forward, what you find is that the thing you are now, the way you behave now, is a function of your particular particulate history. Your physical and physics environment determines your action. And in that sense, you have no free will. That's a position that can only be taken if you deny the existence of a transcendent self. If you deny the existence of a non-material self that is animating the particulate body, the physical body, with consciousness, then yeah, you're helpless. It's correct. Science is correct, and there is no free will, and there's nothing you can do. If, however, you allow room for this one missing component, that the self is not the byproduct of the evolution of material particles and forces, that the self is a transcendent energy, something quite different from matter. It's non-material. Now we have an option. Now we have other doors that can open and other ways of determining behavior in the world that is not merely the reaction to our physical history. So Krishna's point to Arjuna, of course, is not that you're forced to act helplessly, therefore you are helpless. What he's saying is, you have your nature. You have a Kshatriya nature, Arjuna. You have a warrior nature. Someone else has an artistic nature. Someone else has an organizational capability. Someone else is an expert in an art form. Someone else everyone has their particular gifts. I remember I had a friend, he's passed away. His name was Myron Blackman, who was a Buddhist, but he also had a fatal case of MS. And I watched him deteriorate. When I first met him, he was active and walking around, and then he had a walker and then a wheelchair, and then he couldn't get out of bed. And because he was a Buddhist, he was very wise and a beautiful, beautiful human being. And I remember asking him one time when I was with him, this is toward the end, really. I said, Myron, what's it like to have, disabilities? And he looked at me with a very kind of a wry smile, and he said, well, some people have disabilities and other people have those abilities. And I thought that was pretty cool. So we may be defined materially by our circumstances. They don't define the core self, is the point that Krishna is making here to Arjuna. Okay, so now I'd like to open this up. Your turn. Anyone have any questions or comments they'd like to make? If it's about the verse or what we've been discussing, that's fine. We could open it up wider, but let's start, if you don't mind, with questions on the topic. This is a very challenging topic, the notion of free will, the idea of accepting to admit to our limitations as a prerequisite to gaining mastery over those limitations. That's some pretty cool stuff. So I'd be surprised if no one has any questions about it. You can just, I think, Atma, can they just unmute and ask what they want to ask?
I believe that is possible, is it not, Sasha? He is nodding yes. So if someone here would like to ask a question or make a comment, please.
Yeah, I don't have my chat box open, so you're going to have to, oh, here it is. Here it is. Let's see what we got here. Well, Jacob has a lot to say, but I don't see any questions. Let's start with questions. No questions.
Well, you can ask the question, what is will? What is freedom? Start there if you want. What is will? Start with what is will?
Okay. So the in the bhakti or devotional tradition, will is the voluntary setting aside of personal self-interest for a greater good. When you act differently, when you act for selfish motives, that's when you don't have will. That's when you're under the control of the material elements that Krishna is about to explain for Arjuna in the next verse. If you act in a selfless way, unselfish way, in a way that is meant for the well-being of others, when you can put essentially what Arjuna is learning is God's interest, and through God, all living beings, when you can put that interest before your own, that's when things start happening that supersede whatever material limitations you may have had. So will in the bhakti sense means the voluntary putting of oneself in the service of a greater good. Then you have options that you don't have if you're acting selfishly. I hope that's clear. Prabhupada once gave an example. A bank teller can receive millions of dollars a day on behalf of the bank. So in a similar manner, we have unlimited resources that will come to our aid if it is in service to the greater good. Simple example.
Are we living a karma? Because, for instance, you find yourself going to the Bhakti Center. Is this a choice or is it a karma? Is it destiny that was set for you?
Well, it's both. The notion of living karma free, if you will, a jivan mukta, someone who's liberated within the material body. This is worth discussing. It doesn't mean that you don't catch a cold anymore, right? It doesn't mean that you don't have to pay attention when you cross the street. That's not the idea of liberated or living with outside of karma. It means that your intent is pure, your motives are pure, and that purity attracts forces that will help you go farther than what you might have otherwise been allotted materially. But our position is like a fan that's been unplugged. Another example Prabhupada used to give. A fan is spinning, that's our karma. Right? If you unplug the fan, it doesn't stop right away, right? It slows down and eventually it stops. That's our position engaging in devotional life, in service to God. We've, by a proper behavior and proper intent, we've unplugged the karmic fan and it's slowing down. There'll still be some reactions. We've been around a very, very long time. and the consequences of what have happened in the past may still occur, but the odds are smaller, and there is no future karma being created because that karmic fan has been unplugged. So eventually you reach a point where you are karma free, if you will. Is that clear?
Yes. The other thing is that karma is a set destiny. So, somebody, I guess Arjuna is refusing to live his destiny as
In a sense, yes,
Yeah.
that's correct. That's correct.
And the evil Kularas who are living their destiny also by being evil.
Yeah, and it raises some interesting questions. I mean, how is it that, in fact, it's a question that Arjuna asks Krishna coming up very soon in the next chapter, I believe. He says, how is it that sometimes we know better, but we still act in ways that are bad for us, bad for us? How is that possible that we know that something's not good and still we do it? So even Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra in the Bhagavad-gita, the question that you just asked appears. And it's a great deep subject of discussion, why it is that we are our own worst enemies, why it is that we so often stand in our own way, we block our own path. That's a deep discussion. That's a semester's course right there.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes.
Thank you for your wonderful class. I've been thinking about something for the past 2 weeks now. It's about karma and how we say that everything that happens to an individual is based on his or her past karma, whether good or bad, right? So is that a true statement? And if so, then how do we form new ones?
Very good.
Yeah, because it's a bit difficult to understand that everything is based on your past. So I mean, if it's like that, then so I guess how do you justify that in your day-to-day life?
Good question. Excellent. Gold star. You go to the head of the class. As aspiring bhakti yogis, we accept that there's what I call a karmic, cosmic background to creation, that things have a history that precede this one lifetime. By the same token, you can't access those previous lives. There's no wishing for a better past. The life you can access is the one we're living now. So the more productive use of time would be to reframe the question that you just asked in this way. What is it about my life that has brought me to this point? What is it about this lifetime that has led to me acting and behaving and thinking and willing and desiring and having certain emotions in the particular way that I have them? And very often, and this is also in Bhagavad-gita, very often that's a function of experiences in childhood, experiences in early life. It's often a function of parenting. Sometimes parents not all parents are self-realized souls, and they don't always know what's best for their children. And we're a product of that. We are an outgrowth of events and experiences from our own early life. And if you wish to say that those situations are karmic residue, well, that's fine. But again, it's almost not exactly irrelevant, but it's important to recognize that it is the present which occupies us. And the answer to your the second half of your question is that you alter the landscape of your possibilities and potentials by addressing those issues, not by running away from them, which is what Arjuna wanted to do. He wanted to run away. And Krishna says, no, you're going to take this with you. You think by leaving the battlefield, you're going to leave your troubles behind. I'm telling you, they're going to follow you wherever you go. And until we're willing to confront that, they'll always be lurking there in the background. Very often, the determinants of behavior, our karmic package, if you will, operate on a very unconscious level. We're not aware of what it is that has moved us to behave the way we do. I once heard an example that if you as a child, if you go to a funeral and you're seeing a body being lowered into the ground, and a relative comes up and, maybe thinking they can lighten the mood for you, slaps you on the back and says, hey, how you doing? It may be that for reasons that you forget later in life, anytime somebody slaps you on the back, you think of death. I mean, that's a kind of exaggerated example, but we have those associations from very, very early life. And again, you can call that karmic if you like, but just giving it a label doesn't address it. In order to alter that landscape of possibilities, you have to search out what those causes are and address them. Now, it's interesting that Krishna says here in the Bhagavad-gita that even if you make a little bit of progress spiritually, that will save you from the greatest fear. My understanding of that instruction, the 40th verse of the second chapter, is you take one step toward God and God will take 100 steps toward you. If you recognize your own willingness to confront the most difficult thing that you have in your life to confront, and you're offering, I find prayer a very great resource. My dear Krishna, I don't know what to do about this. I'm really in a bind here. I want to love you. I want to know you. I want to move forward. I want to be the greatest possible person I can be in this life. I don't want to lie. I don't want to cheat. I want everything I do from now on to be truthful, to be honest, to be helpful to others. Please help me to figure this out. If you're capable of doing that, and if you listen carefully enough, there'll be clarity that emerges from that frame of heart. I like that we have in that purport here from Srila Prabhupada. He says, the renounced order can be accepted when one has been purified by the discharge of forms of duty which are laid down to purify the heart. That's what our devotional practices are all about.
So I guess so the follow-up question, Prabhu, is, so if everything stems from the past, then like in Arjuna's case, how do we act to mitigate certain things that we might think that is from the past? Do we just say, okay, I think this is my karma, so maybe I should just tolerate, and then if it's a bad one, just tolerate it and it will pass? For instance, if someone is suffering from a disease, and in a disease condition, can we say that, okay, maybe this is my karma, I just have to write it out and not take actions, maybe say go to the hospital, or maybe seek treatment, for instance? Could we just leave it as that?
If God is everywhere, why would he not also be in the hospital? I mean, we have to be practical about this. We're not meant to live in a kind of idealistic cloud. We're meant to live with our feet firmly planted on the ground and using our God-given intelligence and rational thinking to embrace the challenges that we have in our lives. It may be difficult because sometimes I think we have an image of spiritual life as a kind of panacea. If I just chant, then it'll all go away. I think we have that. We have that kind of naive, romantic vision of spiritual life as this big magic eraser. It's just all going to go away. It doesn't actually work like that. It works in a very different way. It works in the sense of, aha, now I'm seeing more clearly what this situation is. And now I have tools that I can address it with. So it's not, I ignore it or I make it go away, but, oh, now I'm seeing it more clearly. And because you're looking to dedicate your life to service, you have an absolutely beautiful motive for doing just that, for undertaking the hard work. That's the elegance of service to others, is that it allows you to do things that you might not even have done for yourself. It's really quite magical and quite wonderful how service to others is the quickest way to kind of get yourself out of the fog of your own problems. We're meant to serve. We're built for service. We just forgotten that. It's not the mood in our culture today.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Someone else have a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Okay.
So I have a question about asking for help. Your phrase was, if you don't.
Well, I'm just going to turn the volume up a little bit because not hearing it very loudly. So start your question again.
So my question is about help, asking Krishna for help. And you stated that, and it was an interesting way you phrased it.
Say your question once more because I didn't hear you.
My question is about help, asking for help.
Yes.
And you said that if you don't ask for help, help has nowhere to go. And I thought that was an interesting phrase. We can ask for help, but my understanding is that we typically don't get what we want. We typically get what we need, because only Krishna sees the whole picture of what it is that we truly need. So there's always been that part of me that's been like, well, why ask for help? And that in my limited mind, I'm asking for something, but I'll just get what Krishna believes that I need. And I was just wondering if you could address that.
You're playing a kind of a dicey game there. You're parsing, you're encumbering your own ability to ask for help because you have already anticipated the result. That, well, I'll ask for it, but ultimately Krishna is going to do what he wants to do, so it doesn't matter what. You don't need to do that. From everything we know about Krishna, from how he describes himself in the texts and the way the great souls have described him, he's not an ingrate. He's very appreciative. The only thing God has everything except your love. It's the one thing that he wants. So if you're asking for help in order to serve him, there's no reason for him to not help you. But we don't chant God's names to get something, except service. The only thing that we want is to serve. And what Krishna does, by way of reciprocating, is to assure us, as he's assuring Arjuna in the Bhagavad-gita, that I'll be there for you. You don't need to worry about it, and you don't also have to be too specific. Krishna, I'm asking you for help. Specifically, I need about $10,000 for this thing. that may be getting a little too specific. But if what you're asking for is, you kindly animate my intelligence so I know what to do here in my service to you, that there's no reason he wouldn't help with that. But that degree of sincerity, that takes some practice,
Yeah, that I was going to comment on that, because there's asking for help when you're a young devotee or when you're in middle, and then when you're advanced. I think your prayers and what you ask for will be dependent on what level you are at in your relationship with Krishna and your understanding of that you should only be asking for devotional service. I was in a class one time, and the answer that I got about asking for help was, don't ask for anything except for service. Don't ask for anything. And, when I think when a very a beginning devotee hears that, I think that could be confusing. Might be, I don't know.
I agree with you. I hear that. That's a very, very, very high level of prayer. You can't imitate that, or you shouldn't imitate that. You shouldn't imitate the great the Paramahamsas, the pure souls who have completely transcended all material. We have desires. We have material desires. There's no point in denying that. As a matter of fact, okay, 3rd chapter, text number 6. Krishna says, one who restrains the senses of action, but whose mind dwells on sense objects, certainly deludes himself and is called a pretender. So you don't want to be a pretender. There's graduated stages of devotional life, of spiritual realization. We're all beginners here. Everybody here is a beginner. And if you need help, ask for help. There's no harm. It's a very beginning stage of help if it's materially motivated, if your prayers are, when I was a kid, there was a very popular preacher named Reverend Ike. He used to give his sermons in Yankee Stadium. God wants you to have a new car. And then they'd pass around these big buckets all up and down the rows. And, I don't want to hear no coins. I just want to hear the rustling of paper. So that's a kind of a very, very compromised kind of relationship with God. The great souls, the pure souls who have worked out all of their material dilemmas, they have that relationship of, there was even one devotee, I don't remember his name, in the life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who came to him and said, I can't bear to see the world suffering. Please give me the karma of the whole world. Let me go to hell. But you please liberate all of these beautiful people. That's very advanced. You can't imitate that. So we have to be honest about where we are. If we need help, ask for it. There's no harm. If it's for service, you can ask for help for anything, but if you're asking for help for something material, it may just encumber you more. So just be careful. No, but
Thank you.
Any kind of prayer is good. Krishna in the Gita says, Krishna is so wonderful. He's God, he knows everything. He says, I'm aware, he tells Arjuna, I know that people come to me for all kinds of things. This is actually a verse in the Gita. He says, there are some people who come to me because they want money. It's right there in the Bhagavad Gita. He says, some people come to me because they want money. Other people come to me because they want me to be the God of their religion. They want me to be their God of Hindu faith, and they'll go to the temple and they'll worship me, Jai. He says, other people are, just curious about me. And then there's this little group that, they really want knowledge of me. They really want to understand who I am. I have a special interest in them. He says, but they're all good. That's my point. In the Gita, Krishna says, even if someone's coming to me because he needs money, he's coming to me at least. And that's better than nothing. That's right there in the Gita.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yogesvara Prabhu,
Yes.
So I wanted to share my approach to this issue and ask your thoughts on it. Okay.
Sure.
So for me, how I personally deal with this issue, like in other words, the issue being, what do I ask Krishna for? So when it comes to, there's the success and the ease, the success of my work, the ease in which I can do it, things I can get, whether it's from work or somehow. I personally don't ask Krishna to help me with those things, although I am interested in doing well, getting certain things, and having it being easier rather than harder. And then I approach Krishna if I'm doing something that's clearly devotional service, although my work is certainly meant to be devotional service, I try to make it, but things that are where there's no question in my mind that the goal that I have is just for Krishna, then I ask Krishna, please help me to do this, but do it for you. And then there's something else that I ask for that relates to these two different types of conduct that I engage in, which is understanding. So I may ask Krishna to help me understand what's the right thing to do, or what's the perspective, how to improve my perspective on something. And that could be about both of these categories of things that are clearly, devotional service, like, chanting or doing service with certain people, devotional service, but also about how to understand relationship with people with whom I'm working, or perhaps you could say against who I'm working, since I'm a lawyer, or how to juggle, various types of work that I have to do, how to deal with it all and make time for various things, meaning make time for the various types of work and also for things, personal relationships, spiritual life. So I asked for Krishna to help me understand. So that's sort of my approach as I'm thinking out loud. I didn't prepare, so I may not have it all exactly accurately what I do, but I think that's pretty much it.
Sure. You can customize your prayers. Everyone is going to have a unique and highly personal relationship with divinity. That's the beauty of bhakti life. That's why we do not feel any attraction to the Mayavad school. The notion of all being the same is abhorrent. It's not at all appealing. We believe there's the world of zero, there's the world of one, and then there's the world of two. The world of zero is certain schools of Buddhism that say ultimately Your prayers are not necessary because at the time that you achieve the fullness of your realization, you dissolve away into nothing. There's no one to pray to. There's the world of one, the monistic school, Mayavada school, which says, when your prayers are fulfilled, you become God. You become one with everything. When we've achieved the fullness of your yoga, your meditation, then your individuality dissolves away and you become Krishna. The world of two is the world of bhakti, the world of devotion, the lover and the beloved. And in a loving relationship, there are a zillion different ways to express love. And so there's no one size fits all here. If I've learned anything in Krishna consciousness, it's that you can't generalize. You have to particularize. Krishna is a person. You're a person. I'm a person. All the lovely guests here today are individuals. And each of us has a particular personality, a particular psychology. And that can all be engaged properly in service. So, yeah, absolutely. Whatever your particular loving framework is, the prayers should emerge from that. So, yeah, prayer. Those deities behind me, I pray to them every day. I just got them a few weeks ago. I'd never had deities in my home before.
Oh, wow. They're beautiful, Yogesvara.
Those are 9-inch tall white marble Gornitai deities from Ujjain. They're devotees in Ujjain who make deity makers.
Mhm.
And I got them specifically so that I could offer them prayers. My particular personalized frame of reference for prayer is that I'm writing a biography of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I didn't think I had the right to do that without his blessings. So I got deities so that I could pray to them every day. Kindly help me out. So that's my prayer, mood of prayer for the moment, is to ask for help with my writing.
Very, very interesting and inspiring.
It took me a while. I think I was afraid of having deities, actually. I never thought of myself as a particularly exemplary devotee. And the idea of having Krishna in my home in a tangible, visible way, all of a sudden I would have to be a lot more accountable, a lot more thoughtful. And what I'm finding is that it's relishable. I go outside each morning and I find a flower and offer the Gornitai deities a flower and a little bit of water. I greet them every day. I wake them at 6. It has to be regulated. If you want to develop a relationship, it needs to be done on a methodical basis. And if you want to read a lovely story that talks about that, read The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. It's all about how to develop a loving relationship. In that book, it's between a pilot and a fox, but same idea. Whatever you can do on a regular daily basis, just do that. Stick to that. So, any last thoughts here from anyone? All right. So, Atmaniveda, what comes next in your gathering here this evening?
If you could, we could close with another brief chanting, if you'd like. And that would be it.
Little chant.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Devo. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
If everyone, if you like, you can unmute yourself and join me expressing appreciation for our wonderful guest speaker who gave us his wonderful association with the wonderful talk this evening. Yogesvara Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.